Today, I'm speaking with Tokyo Olympian Kris. He's a track and field runner for Denmark, went to college in Arkansas to train with arguably the top track and field program in the United States. He's since transitioned to an enterprise SDR role at a market-leading public tech company. And I did want to call out for those of you that recently followed the launch of Tech Sales Ascension, our new platform. He is an instructor there because not only have I been working with him for a long time and know the quality of his work, but he's since in his first year gone on to set numerous company records. Kris is actually going to be starting to contribute videos to this channel as well. One of the things I'm seeing that's more and more valuable is having people who do things maybe a little bit different than I do, but have still had tons of success themselves. So I hope you get a lot of value out of this interview and future videos with Kris going forward. All right, well, thanks everyone for joining. I'm here with Kris today, who is an Olympian for Denmark in the Tokyo Olympics. Would love to kind of obviously get your background and maybe set the stage for us where you were a year and a half ago looking into tech sales, and we'll start to break it down from there.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, and I appreciate you having me on here, Eric. So in terms of my background, it's very saturated, I would say, but obviously coming from an athletic background, I did track and field for the far majority of my life. So did that for about 10 years, did it throughout college. And I was at this interesting intersection after graduating college where I was kind of like, and this was right around the time where the Olympics was happening too. So I was in this spot where I had to make a decision of like, do I continue to do track and field? Unfortunately, the sport is not a sport where there's too much financial upside in it. So it would kind of be this thing where I continue pouring in, more and more money, more and more energy, and kind of at the expense of my professional career. At this time, I was obviously looking at various different career paths. I was looking at finance. I was looking at investment banking and all these various different elements, like even venture capital. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but tech sales really caught my eye. And obviously, I connected with you, Eric, on, I believe it was Reddit actually. And you were super helpful to me, opened my eyes to a lot of the opportunities. And once I realized like the upside of tech sales and the benefits and, the location freedom of being able to work from home and kind of just grow your career path to a level where you're making like 400 or 500K if you make it up to, the top 1%, that was really appealing to me. So yeah, I broke into tech sales, obviously with your help, and it's been awesome. Like I'm super happy I made the leap, and it's definitely a career that I resonate with, and where I can translate a lot of the skills and competencies that I learned over in track and field. I can kind of like take that and apply that into tech sales. So it's been awesome for sure.
Yep. And I think on that note too, I have my own experience coming into tech sales. I'm curious from your perspective, maybe what particularly well about your athletic background suited tech sales, and also coming into this relatively blind, a year and a half ago, what were some things that you quickly had to learn specific to the industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's lots of things. Obviously, I think the standard answer is like perseverance, like dealing with rejection and failure and stuff like that is pretty common in the field. I think we basically get paid to be told no. So it can be a mentally taxing job sometimes. But I think honestly, the biggest element is probably emulation. So I think one thing that I did in track is you're always looking for like, what are the top performers doing? Like, what are the professional athletes doing at the top level? Like, the Olympic finalists, like how do they work out? Like, what do they do in their spare time? How do they prepare for races? What's their support system like? Like, you learn to look at those things and try to emulate a lot of that in your own day to day. And so in tech sales as well, the first thing that I did, which I think caused me a lot of success initially, was I looked at the top performers. I looked at like, hey, the people who were here in the seat before me, and even like territory specific, right? I was looking at what do they do? Like what did they do to be successful? What did they do to get promoted? And I just tried to emulate as much of that as possible. Like there's really no need to reinvent the wheel. I think they're like, you definitely can create new methods of doing things, but I think it's about getting to a point where you're abundant first, like where you're hitting your quota, where you're crushing your number, and then you can start like testing various different elements. So I think the biggest element is really emulation, like looking at what top performers are doing and taking the right elements, right? Like you don't necessarily have to copy everything. You also have to figure out like, what are the essential elements? How can I take those elements and apply them into my own day to day?
Yeah. No, that's great perspective. And I think I'm curious too, maybe helping others that are watching now, right? I know you were fortunate to be in a position where you had numerous different offers across both small startups and large companies. Also had some rejections too, right? But I think, how did you break down, especially with your background, deciding between maybe a startup and something for the viewers reference as well, we'll get into in future videos, is more your entrepreneurial experience. So you built stuff largely from scratch. You've taken companies from zero to, substantial numbers before. How do you even begin to assess work for a young growing startup, tap into that past experience, work for a market leader, kind of on this emulation note, right? Go into a place where there's a proven path for success. How did you break that down on your side?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think like obviously it's different from place to place. So like I think if you're going into a bigger corporation, there's probably more room for emulation. Like, there's more of a track record. There's more people who have followed this very concise path. So it's probably easier to emulate people in that position. Like I think if you're jumping into a startup position, like yes, you can still do emulation. Yes, you can still look for those different patterns, but you're a lot more like trying to figure things out, right? Like it's kind of like you're wearing like 10 different hats and you're all over the place, which I personally like that, but I decided I needed to change. Like I've done the startup thing. I wanted to try the corporate thing. Fortunately, we're at work is kind of like a fine balance. So like in terms of size and everything, we are growing super quickly. We are pretty big, but it still feels like a startup environment, which is super cool. But as I was going through that process, to answer your question a little bit more concisely, I think the way that I package my experience, like I think even though you have a lot of experience, it's not enough. Like it's about packaging it into like a little box and explain to them like, hey, all this experience that you had, why does it prepare you for the job? Like, what are some of the soft skills that you learned? Because like, even though, yes, like I dealt with a lot of rejection, there's a lot of perseverance. I have a lot of life skills that show that I can work hard and that I've worked hard in my life. You have to be able to explain that, right? Like if you just get on a call and you just say like, oh yeah, I work hard, like I'm a hard worker, like that's cool. But if you can explain a story, like lean more on stories. Tell them about a time where you worked hard. Tell them about a time where you had to overcome like something really hard or something really challenging in your life. I think that's a lot more powerful than just sitting on a call and explaining to them like, oh yeah, I'm a hard worker. Like, yes, I might have the benefit of the doubt there because I did go to the Olympics and I do have like 10 years of sportsmanship behind me. But I think if I wouldn't have packaged my past experience into a way that was conducive for tech sales, like I wouldn't have broken in. Like that's just the truth. And I was having a little bit of trouble in the beginning, to be honest. Like it wasn't just sunshine and rainbows. Like I did have to realize a couple things. I did have to think about like, what are the soft skills that are essential? Like I did have to look online, what are some of the day-to-day responsibilities? I think it's really just about like preparing yourself for the role. Like use the resources online. There's so many resources online. Like there's so many great YouTube videos. There's so many, courses out there that you can tap into. So there's a lot of resources out there for you to like take advantage of. And I think just learning, like tapping into that knowledge pool is what's really going to make you a lot more appealing to sales leaders and SDR managers.
Yeah. And for everyone's reference too, Kris is now at a market leading public tech company. So in the shortest way possible, they're the number one cloud infrastructure provisioning, all sorts of things we could get into on a separate topic. And to your point now, you've had a lot of success. You've been able to emulate both people in your company. You're using resources online, maybe more tactically, just tapping into some of the things that you have done particularly well in your first year now. What do you think has made you become the top performer as an enterprise SDR? And what are you doing maybe relative to other peers, or, open-ended question there. What are you doing differently that's consistently putting you at the top?
Yeah, it's pretty funny actually. I think initially I was trying to be very, very professional. So I was trying very hard is I think the right way to say it. And I think whenever you're new, like whenever you're just getting started, I think everybody just wants to do a good job, right? Like they're trying to hold themselves to a certain standard or whatnot. And so honestly, like whenever I stopped doing that, whenever I just stopped trying so hard to like sound like a robot, is when I got the best results. Like just be a human being, right? Like the person on the other side of that screen that you're talking to over a Zoom call or over, a Google Meet, it's just like you. Like outside of, the 9 to 5, they're probably just a normal human being. You'd probably relax and chill with them. So like take down that barrier, sound more like a human, not just on Zoom calls, but also like over email. I think that that has really increased my reply rates. It's increased my conversion rates for booking meetings, for getting opportunities. Like that's the biggest piece of advice I would probably give somebody is like, yes, be professional, but also like add some personality, right? Like don't sound too much like a robot. Like try to be yourself. I think that's really a big key. And don't spend too much time. People do get lost in the sauce of like looking at an email for like 15, 20 minutes before they send it. And it's literally like, I've done this myself. So like, I know exactly what the situation is like, but like 80% done, email looks good. Like send it off. Like otherwise you're never going to get done all your, all your prospecting. You're never going to get meetings, or you are going to get meetings, but you're not going to get enough meetings to hit your quota. Right. So it's that fine balance of perfectionism, but also getting comfortable, which I do think comes with tenure in the role. But yeah, really, I see so many reps trying way too hard. I think just relax, right? And like we and Eric, you do the same thing. We speak to people in cloud. We speak to like CISOs and people that are very very high up at public tech leading companies, and they appreciate that stuff. So like if they appreciate that stuff, I feel confident saying that any vertical would appreciate like just be more human. It is really like the key message, I think.
No, great perspective, Kris. And for everyone watching, if you've seen Tech Sales Ascension, this is really the power of what we're now building. Kris is an instructor here as well, not only because of his impressive pedigree, but also the results he's gotten in the first year in his role. So these are the types of perspectives you get to tap into, not just me, not just Kris. We have other reps as well contributing to this platform. Kris, maybe I know kind of a huge question, maybe one or two things that you're seeing people breaking in that they should be aware of. You've talked to kind of that human element, talking to stories. Anything else or just worth going and double tapping into that further on the outside looking in, trying to break into tech sales?
I think we touched on all the important elements from my perspective, at least. But I will say, and this is such a standard answer, but really just like dive deep, right? Like really do the work, do your research. I mean, breaking into tech sales is like, it's not the easiest thing to do in the world, but it's also not the hardest thing to do in the world. Like there's a lot of resources out there that can really guide you on your path. Like there are frameworks to do this stuff properly. And so I think just be curious. I think anybody who really wants to break into tech sales will break into tech sales. There's so many resources about, breaking into tech specifically, because at the end of the day, it is tech, right? Like people are utilizing online messaging boards, Reddit, YouTube, like courses, whatnot. Like there are so many good resources out there. So I would really say like take advantage of those, tap into them. Like even just the channel, Eric, that you've created so far. Like there's so many great resources on that channel. So really just like stay consistent, like start taking notes and just learn, right? Like make it part of your day-to-day activities to just like sit down, watch some videos, like, absorb more knowledge. And I think it'll come by itself as well.
Awesome. Well said. And yeah, Kris, as always, appreciate the time. For those of you watching as well, Kris is actually going to start popping up on the channel, contributing some to our YouTube presence, as well as Tech Sales Ascension as well. So definitely look forward to that. There's so much that we didn't even have the time to even reach the surface of, especially with your entrepreneurial background. But as always, Kris, appreciate the time. Great syncing up, and we will talk to you soon.
Appreciate it, Eric. Thanks, man.
Thanks.